Okay, hello everyone. I am Ebba. I'm CFO of the leading Nordic blockchain company Chromaway. And we are the creators of the Chromia platform. And this is a layer 1 public blockchain. And we're more than 200 people spread across 27 countries. So we are a really, really global country. Lots of perspectives, a lot of people from all over the world. With me today, I have Julia Branson. And Julia, she is lead at DAO as a service, which we'll talk a little bit more about in Chromaway. And Branson is the director of the Alice Foundation. And for you who saw Lenny talk earlier today about My Neighbor Alice, when you build a decentralized game, you need a DAO, and you need a foundation to be that legal wrapper for that DAO. And that is Branson, who's with us now. Yeah, so they're going to come back. So, the rise of DAOs. I mean, we all love and fear and think about this as something really, really exciting. But let me ask you, who in this room knows how to build a country? Who knows? I see no hands. So why am I even asking this strange question? Well, to answer the why, we need to recognize that basically all civilizations started by a lot of decentralized groups of people, small groups, who actually made their own decisions about their local community, very decentralized. But then as they grew, and these societies grew, they started to centralize, of course, because they needed to collaborate around resources. And I think also, I mean, in this forum, we need to be fair. We have to be kind of grateful to a lot of these organizations and institutions that we've had, because they really helped us through history. They've done a lot of good for us. They let us collaborate so we could grow and prosper. And a degree of centralization was really, really needed. They actually provided trust for us. Trust. But is there a threshold to centralization? Is there a point in time where it's actually too complicated and too complex problems to solve to only be centralized thinking, centralized decision making and ownership? And has this point perhaps come now? Are we at this point now? And then it comes back to the question of trust. The trust we have in our institutions and in organizations. Do we trust them? And I think you probably, as well as I, have seen the news the latest days. No. No. This is an area of distrust. We don't trust. You see the news. You've seen the polarization of ideas and the polarization and the distrust in each other. We don't trust each other anymore. This is a point where this doesn't work anymore. So if it doesn't work, we reckon, as Chromaway, that we have to, not only to survive as a crypto company, and not only to stick to our core values and help society and humanity, we feel that we have to understand and we have to look deeper into what's next, what should be next. If we need a new model, should it be absolute decentralization? Is that where we're going? Or is it maybe a hybrid of both decentralized and centralized? Or what is really the best balance for something that will work? Well, this is why we started this DAO initiative in Chromaway, where we are trying to not only use that we have this layer 1 blockchain technology and that we have these 200 plus talents, but we also want to call on crowd wisdom. And I think basically that's why we're here. It's not us only who are going to do this. We're not fit to figure this out ourselves. We need people to join in. And I think this is by definition, actually. We as a company, we believe in like people doing it together by design. So I'm not going to talk or spill any more beans now. I'm going to hand over to my team, or to our team and our ecosystem colleagues, to talk a little bit more about this mission we're on. And also, and it's not a mission impossible, I must say.
No.
And also how all of you here can actually join into this mission to find the next way of organizing. So please, Ylva, Julia and Branson, take.
Thank you, Ebba. So we will now transition from why decentralization and DAOs are so important for us and go more into what are we doing today? What is Chromaway doing today? And what do we wish to do in the future? So what do we do? Well, to meet the expectations of players and users of My Neighbor Alice, where we promise them a decentralized game, we understand that building a DAO, it's inevitable. And for those of you who is not familiar with My Neighbor Alice yet, or maybe you missed the speech that Lenny gave earlier this morning, My Neighbor Alice is one of our successful blockchain games in Chromaway's ecosystem. And referring to the balance that Ebba is talking about from decentralization or centralization, we are trying to navigate and find that balance by going through an approach called progressive decentralization. So progressive decentralization basically means that we build infrastructure first. We build community first, making sure that our in-game economy is sustainable, circular, and healthy. And then we have this two-step process in how we're gonna transfer power from Chromaway to the foundation that we have here in Singapore, and then to the users themselves. And right now in Chromaway, we are in the first step of this process. We are working on transferring power from Chromaway to My Neighbor Alice Foundation based here in Singapore. And today we have Branson Lee with us here, who is representative of the foundation.
Thanks, Julia. Can everyone hear me? Okay, so I've been in this space for close to 6 years now. I think, and I'm very, very, very honored that I'm working with Ebba and Julia and the rest of the team at Chromaway. So my role in the foundation is basically a transitory role. I know it's an interesting word for the past 1 year. But essentially what we're trying to do here is to eventually transfer the power to the stakeholders. And what I mean by that is that by the stakeholders are the players, the developers, the landowners, and so on and so forth. Because at the end of the day, we believe that the game should and must be owned by all these people. Because as much as the project can drive the vision and mission of the game, essentially what we are trying to do here is to get them involved. And that's the definition of Web3. Right? And this is a very interesting role because if you think of the traditional role of a person in power, you tend to hold on to it. But what we're doing here in Chromaway is the reverse, right? So we basically transfer the power from a centralized project to a decentralized one. And of course, I won't bore you with the definition of a DAO, and I'm sure all of us know what it is. But it's a very daunting task, but I'm sure with the help of my colleagues, I think we can get there. Yeah. So let me just, I guess, paint a little bit picture of what a DAO is. Right? I think it is worth understanding, the definition of a DAO, but a picture paints 1,000 words. So on your screen, you can see on your left-hand side, on your left-hand side, I know the words are a little bit small, but essentially it starts off at the top, right? Which means that the power is concentrated at the top. Essentially what we're saying is that it's very tight control, okay? And it's hierarchical, usually not transparent, right? And you are on an invite-only basis, and not always global, right? And on the right-hand side, you will see the sort of a structure of a DAO, right? It's loose, it's grassroots. I think this word is very important. as transparent, open, and global, right? But I think besides all these things that we see on the screen, I think it is worthwhile to understand that the concept of a DAO is not really to define the structure, right? Because I think where a lot of DAOs are failing, if I may say that, is that they try to pin down something that is a structure or a form. But I think, like what one of my colleagues have mentioned to Julia, is that DAO is actually a concept, right? So a lot of people misunderstand that, oh, DAO, I must be fully decentralized, everyone is equal and things like that. But I think that's a little bit far-fetched, because at the end of the day, you still need somebody to run the DAO, right? And a good example would be, let me give you an analogy, right? So let's say you are running a manufacturing company, right? Manufacturing of aeroplanes, right? You may not want your passengers, who are your stakeholders, because they pay you, to actually design the engine, right? Because it doesn't make sense. Because some of them may not be equipped with the skills or the skill set to actually, come up with a proper design for the aircraft engine, right? So therefore, you need specific skill sets from specific people. So therefore, I think what we are trying to say here is that the DAO effectively is something that is evolving, something that requires a little bit more thought to it, rather than, okay, we're going to decentralize every single thing, and let's do it, right? But having said that, I think it's a lofty goal, and we are trying to get there with the help of Ebba and Julia and the rest of the team. I think we have a daunting task, but as what Julia will share with you in a few moments, we have actually put together some thoughts and also map out the different structures. And for that, let me hand it over to Julia.
Thanks. So how do we actually build this? How do we actually work with this? What I will talk about right now is what our collective brains in this DAO team we have at Chromaway have came up with so far. But only so far. We understand that there is much more and will be much more to this. If you are involved in the DAO space, maybe you are a part of a DAO or you are considering creating a DAO, you understand already that there is a lot of components that you have to take into consideration. There is so many elements you have to think of. And together with my team, we have narrowed down all of these components into 6 essential dimensions for a DAO. These dimensions are political, technical, economic, financial, social, and legal. And at Chromaway, in our DAO team, we have a team for each and every dimension of this. For example, we have an expert within political science, thinking and reflecting about governance process, voting mechanism. We also have an expert technical developer who is, as we speak right now, is developing an MVP for a voting system with a library that can be customized to your and other projects' purposes. And in the technical dimension, we are also looking at wallet solutions. For example, should there be an integration with MetaMask and different type of voting protocols. For the economic dimension, we have an expert within tokenomics. We are looking at different incentives, financial, non-financial, and also different type of business models that would be the most suitable for our project.
Yeah, and at the bottom, you will see 3 other circles. One of them is financial. I think financial is very important because a DAO cannot function without budget, right? So, and that's the reason why most of the projects out there, whether you're selling NFTs or some other form of tokens, I think effectively what you're trying to do is to do fundraise, right? But after you do the fundraise, what exactly do you do with the funds, right? And who's going to govern it? Are you going to let the core team govern it? Are you going to invite some skilled person from, let's say, one of the landowners or some of the players, right? So these are some examples of the sort of thoughts that we have put into this. And then revenue, right? A lot of the NFT projects out there has a revenue model of royalty, right? Is that something that you want to take on board, or is there some other better revenue, right? And of course, the management of the keys itself, right? So I think all these are very important points for financial. And then let's look at social. Social is all about storytelling, right? The underlying fundamental for every DAO is the vision and mission, right? So if you don't have a story that you can tell your stakeholders, your project or your community will not feel the sense of belonging, right? So that leads into creating a very strong community, right? How do you nurture some of these stakeholders to be a lot more active, right? And talking about active, an interesting point is that most of the DAOs that you see out there, about 80% of the members are non-active, right? Only 20% of them, right? Then the question is, how do you then ensure that there's active participation from the community, right? Or is it on the basis of who makes the most noise get to contribute, right? So these are some of the examples of things that we are looking at as well, right? And then organizational structure, right? How should you structure a DAO, right? Is it everyone on equal grounds, or should there be a leader? If there's a leader, who should be appointed as a leader? Or if there's a delegate, how do you appoint a delegate, right? And if the delegate acts maliciously, how do you take power away from the delegate? On what basis, right? So these are some examples of a lot of, I guess, difficulties in understanding how to bring across this idea of storytelling as well as getting active participation. And finally, the legal side. This is an interesting point because a lot of people feel that, hey, DAO, we are all digital, we don't really need a legal wrapper. But I think if you look at the way things are moving, especially in the recent regulatory and compliance environment, I think that is also an important point. And that's the reason why we have chosen a certain jurisdiction, and that's in Singapore. Of course, it really depends on how the rest of the DAOs out there want to structure themselves. But I think it is important to note that we cannot take away from the fact that there are, dare I say, the TradFi world versus the DAO world, right, or the crypto world, right? But eventually we will see a convergence between both, and that's where DAOs need to ensure that they are on the right side, right? I know this is a very contentious point, but effectively, if everyone is operating, everyone is collecting salaries and things like that, do you pay taxes or do you not pay taxes, right? I think it's worthwhile to think about first, right, rather than just push it away and not do anything about it. So these are the 6 components that we have mapped out. It is by no means, the end-all and be-all for everything, but these are the starting points that a lot of the DAOs out there can sort of, take note of.
Yes. So do we think that these dimensions and or way of working can address Ebba's question? Who knows how to build a country? Who knows how to build a community? Because a community is the very essence and basis of every country that we know of. And if building a community is complex, well then, we all understand that building a country is even more so. No, sorry, how do I go back? Here, okay. So, looking back at this process, creating a DAO for My Neighbor Allies, we quickly realized that this experience we have, this knowledge that we get, we need to challenge ourselves. We need to start questioning ourselves. And we do that by realizing that true decentralization is about knowledge sharing. It's about contribution. So we also need to be allowed, and we need to ask for others to contribute, others to share their knowledge with us as well. Looking at Chromaway's portfolio, it is quite diverse. We do not only do blockchain games. We are also having DeFi projects. We're making projects within marketplaces, fashion tech, real estate. We're having a lot of different areas. And that push us to see the urgency of creating something that we can share, something that we can build further on and scale. So this is how DAO as a service was born in Chromaway. DAO as a service, the vision of that is to create a modular-based microservice that will enable for communities to customize their DAO by picking and choosing different mechanisms and microservices from these 6 dimensions that we just spoke about and customize them to their own need and purpose. This is something that we will do internally at first for our other projects. And when we have matured in that and shared it with you, gain feedback from all of you, then this is something we can do externally.
So, thanks, Julia. I think, I guess the summary for today's talk is not so much of telling you how to build a DAO. Of course, I think we sort of internally have mapped out some of the components. But I think what we want to do here is to sort of extend a hand to the audience here and also help us build this thing, right? Because I think at the end of the day, the DAO is a very nascent idea. And of course, people have tried it, some have failed, some are getting there. But I think we recognize that we don't have all the answers, right? In fact, for all you know, I think some of us here at the audience may even have some of the answers that we are looking for, right? So I think this sort of the next slide is to sort of an invite to all of us here that if you have any ideas or you want to contribute in some way, please feel free to scan, submit the form. Very simple, 3 questions, your name, your email, and what exactly are you interested in pertaining to a DAO. And we'll get back to you and we'll get you involved in some of these discussions. And I don't say this lightly because this is an interesting story, because I met one of the founders here, I think it was last Saturday, yeah. And I was talking to Ebba and Julia that, I met this guy and he works in a DAO. Of course, he's also working on another project. But Ebba and Julia invited him for DAO discussions, right? A total stranger, but obviously he knows what he's talking about. But that's the testament of how open Ebba and Julia is, and of course the rest of the team at Chromaway, in understanding and also extending, sort of an invitation to anyone who knows how to build a DAO. That's number one. And secondly, not just from the area of DAO, right? If you have sort of some ideas of, perhaps we can do something this way, right? Maybe have you thought about this, right? So these are some of the discussions that spark a lot more thought into what we are doing. And I feel that that's extremely, extremely valuable, because no one has all the answers, right? Even for ourselves, we have been thinking about this for a while. I don't think we have all the answers as well. So please join us. We'll get back to you once you have sent in the form. And we are more than happy to get you involved in some of the things that we are doing. Okay?
Well, I think that was all for our presentation, but we would love to discuss more with you. And if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And yeah, we would love to discuss more. Thank you so much for listening.
And thank you, team. Before we go off stage, I can't help saying this, but we always think this is exciting and so on. But you know what we're really doing up here? I want you to also feel this. We're doing something that's really, really difficult. We're trying to hand over power from ourselves to someone else, because we know that it's smarter for the collective, right? The community. So this is sort of the final frontier. That's what we're doing. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Tim.